Welcome back to the Wide Awake Media podcast. I'm your host, DD Denslow, and we're here speaking to real journalists, powerful voices, and freedom fighters who have stood against the destruction of Western culture as the establishment implement their plans for a one-world government. Today's guest is former radio host, independent journalist, and someone I'm very proud to call a friend, Rick Munn. Rick was the star of TNT with his show Locked and Loaded, and is now a highly successful political and social commentator with his own YouTube channel, No Risk, No Reward Media. Please go and check it out on YouTube. It's at No Risk, No Reward 1984, and he focuses on the shenanigans and skullduggery going on in Ireland, which we'll be talking about today. Rick, I'm genuinely delighted for an opportunity to catch up with you. It will be like old times. Welcome to the Wide Awake Media podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Darren. Nice to see you in action again. Nice to see you behind the proverbial microphone and broadcasting again. So I'm very happy to be invited on here, and hopefully I won't tank the channel or wreck your viewing numbers as a result of my...
I'm pretty sure there's no concern that that's going to happen. So you progressed from you took some time out. You started your own YouTube channel. You've been talking about the goings on Ireland. We're just going to get straight into it. It's something that me and you, immigration is something that me and you discussed repeatedly during our time working on radio together. What is going on in Ireland?
Well, basically what's happening is it's a controlled demolition of Irish society at the hands of the Irish government. All blame must lie with the Irish government. They open the doors, they roll out the red carpets, they send out invitations in multiple languages to multiple people in various places of the world to say Ireland is not full. Where refugees are welcome here. Come on in. We'll look after you. We'll give you a better crack at life here. The problem is, Darren, that there is no social infrastructure there to support the huge numbers of people that are now flooding to Ireland, or as it's more commonly known now, Treasure Island or Treasure Ireland. The world and their dogs seem to be making their way here, skipping across continents, skipping over oceans, flying over, various land masses to make their way to cold, wet, miserable Ireland. And the question must be, why? Why would you leave sunny climes, and why would you leave your own people and culture to come all the way to Ireland unless there's a big fat carrot at the end of a stick of which they are intending to chomp upon? So doors have been open. There's a lack of housing in Ireland. Irish people don't have enough houses. The government aren't building enough houses. It's almost impossible to rent. Rental accommodation prices are going through the roof. Young Irish people are leaving Ireland. They're migrating away from Ireland to try and make a better life elsewhere, leaving a void for employment that the government are justify filling it with cheap labour from overseas. And we're in this vicious death spiral at the minute that's reaching a critical mass to be.
What are the numbers like then? I mean, I see accounts, Michael O'Keefe posts a lot. Is somebody that I see a lot on X. I see the tent cities, the military barracks that are being filled up with people who are quite clearly not Irish. In terms of actual impact in numbers, what is it like? I hear numbers like 20% of the Irish population is now black.
Well, there's the numbers in terms of the geographical makeup of Ireland anyway, just to give your listeners an idea. Ireland is not a big country when it comes to population. So the population of the so-called Republic of Ireland is about 5.5 million. In Northern Ireland, you're talking about 2 million. So for the whole island of Ireland, you're talking no more than 7 million people, which is probably less than the population of Birmingham, okay? And when you fly in over Ireland, you look down, it's called the Emerald Isle. If you've ever flown in there, you look down and it's just green fields everywhere, lush green fields everywhere. And people might think, well, there's a lot of empty space there. There's plenty of room to squeeze more people in. You could stick another 5 or 10 million into Ireland and nobody would even notice them there. That's assuming they have places to live. So per head of capita or per head of population, Ireland is taking in way more numbers than most of its European counterparts because we're such a small place geographically to begin with. So there's hundreds of thousands of people piling in here at the moment. There are deportations going on. The government are throwing the general population a bone to say, we are doing something about this. We're deporting people that are here illegally. But last year, in 2025, there was about 5 deportation flights, mostly to Georgia. One maybe went to Nigeria, with a total of about 500 people on them. Okay, so when you think there's tens of thousands of people coming in and 500 people being deported, it's like your bath overflowing. Both taps are on, the plug holes down there.
And you got a thimble.
They're standing, with a thimble, scraping out water and throwing it into the sink. And we're doing something about this. The taps need to be turned off and the plug hole needs to be opened, and there needs to be mass deportations. It's as simple as that, because the way things are going, it is completely unsustainable, and it's now impacting Middle Ireland. In the past, it would have been little isolated rural villages and working class areas were getting it tight. Now it's Middle Ireland are starting to see this. The IPAS centres and the asylum centres are starting to be put into nice neighbourhoods, into affluent areas, because there's nowhere else for them to go now. So we're starting to see a rumbling happening now in Middle Ireland, and the government knows this, and on the trajectory that they're on, it's just simply, it can't continue. Something's going to have to give, and give pretty soon, unless there are mass deportations.
And we'll get on to sort of the public reaction in a sec. You said, it's hitting the middle classes. They might be the ones that might be able to make some sort of impact. Has the Irish government changed how they are categorising these new arrivals? I.e., they're no longer arriving illegally, they're arriving legally, and therefore they don't have to be part of that thimble full of water that's being thrown back overseas.
Well, what's happening is, this is an elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room has been growing, and the room has been shrinking. So there's only so much spin and lies and wool pulled over the eyes that the Irish government could get away with. It's now got to the point whereby they are now acknowledging that there is some correlation between mass immigration from the third world of unvetted, predominantly male men, and an increase in crime, an increase in prison population, a lack of housing, and 50% of the current Irish homeless numbers, 50% in emergency accommodation, are foreign. Over 50% are now foreign. So of the continually increasing Irish homelessness figures that are going up month after month, with the Irish government declaring billions of surplus from corporation tax and, taking money in tolls, and they've got money set away for a rainy day. They've been in power now for, this is the second iteration of a coalition government that's in its second 5-year term that started in November 2024. Things are getting worse and worse, Dan. Okay, they're getting worse and worse. So they have to change. They have to at least acknowledge now the fact that immigration is having an impact on this. Before, if you would have said this, or I would have said this in a broadcast, we would have been labelled right-wing. We would have been labelled xenophobic. We would have been labelled extremist. But now,
racist.
The Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, or the Prime Minister, and the Deputy, Simon Harris, are now coming out with this far-right rhetoric to say, actually, there is an impact on mass immigration in Ireland, on housing, on lack of school places, putting huge burden on healthcare, crime rates going up. So they're almost starting to sound like extremists now.
We have something similar going on with Starmer. Every now and then he says, the Conservative government wanted a migration experiment, and that's why you're seeing it, and we're going to start, 2 in, 1 out. This is the closest we've got to a far-right government with Starmer. You've got the same sort of rhetoric coming from the Irish government. How bad in terms of optics? What is it like on the street in Ireland? And how does it compare to Northern Ireland?
Well, it depends on where you go. So where I live, for example, I live in County Down, right up in the northeast part of Northern Ireland, or the island of Ireland. It hasn't impacted me, for example. I can literally see Scotland from where I live. So I'm in the top right-hand corner of the island. If you were to go to the bottom left-hand corner of the island of Ireland, to County Kerry, for example, 10% of the population of County Kerry are Ukrainians, right? So 1 in 10 people in County Kerry are from Ukraine. That's a fact. That's let alone the Middle Easterns and the Africans that are coming in there as well. Some villages in Ireland are now outnumbered 2 to 1 by foreigners, where in the past they would have been 100% Indigenous Irish. Dublin is almost unrecognisable.
I've seen pictures of Dublin and it makes my jaw drop, because it's so stark, the change that's happened in 5 years with all these new faces.
Yeah, and again, in Northern Ireland, or the north of Ireland, the border the border towns or cities there, Newry, Armagh, Derry, going around those areas, they're becoming more and more, let's just say, diverse. Okay, the further you go up into the top right-hand corner of Ireland, this little pocket that I'm inhabiting at the minute is probably the least touched. Northern Ireland, I believe, has the least amount of migratory change in the UK and Ireland. You go to somewhere to Dublin, or you go to somewhere like Cork, or you go to somewhere like Galway, or you go to somewhere like Limerick, they're unrecognisable. So some places have got it worse than others. However, everywhere is being affected to an extent. Belfast, I used to worked in Belfast for decades. Belfast is unrecognisable at the moment. The University Quarter, parts of the village area in South Belfast are unrecognisable. The demographics there are, 10, 20, 30% people that were not born or reared there. So, I mean, it's noticeable. And because I haven't been working there for 5 years, if I go into it now, I can see a big difference in it.
It happens so fast. I went back to Plymouth after 2 years and it was already a problem in Plymouth. But I went back, 6 months ago to start living again and set up this podcast. And the changes from the 2 years before where it was a real problem are stark. It's breathtaking how quickly it's happened. So what's the public reaction? We've seen the protest. You've mentioned that it's starting to nibble at the middle classes. What is the reaction by the Irish public to this mass, uncontrolled immigration into their country?
Well, last year in particular, there were a lot of nationalist rallies held predominantly in Dublin. And there was a real swell of anti-immigration. And let me be clear about this. Listen, it's impossible. I don't know of any country that exists where there is no migration and immigration. People leave countries, people move to countries all over the world and have done since the beginning of time. Okay, the problem arises when the numbers become unmanageable. The people that live in the countries that everyone's flooding into are not being provided for. Their children aren't getting school places. They can't get hospital or medical appointments. They can't get a house. They can't rent a house, so on and so forth. It comes to the point, there's a tipping point, okay? So there's always been immigration into Ireland, but the numbers were always very, very low. They were very, very manageable, and they didn't bring with them huge crime waves. And there's always been people that have left Ireland, went to other countries to seek a better life or better climate or whatnot. That's always been the case. Same with the UK, same with Europe. The problem is now that the numbers are just gobsmackingly large, that they're having a massive demographic and social impact on Ireland, to the point whereby people are now, they can't get a house. If you can't get a house to live in, and the cost of living is going up so much, and you're sitting back watching foreign labour coming in droves and taking houses or getting preferential treatment or getting free accommodation in IPAS centres or hotels, for example, while your own friends or maybe family members can't even get emergency accommodation. That grinds people's gears. And that would be the case if 1 million British people or Irish people moved to Africa, to Mogadishu, and were given preference over the Somali residents there. Do you mean to tell me there wouldn't be outcry in East Africa if there were, 5 million white people came and started taking houses and taking jobs?
The machetes would come out, wouldn't they?
The machetes, the pangas would be out, man. That's a fact. So what I'm trying to say is here, it's got to this point now. It's so bad that last April, it was around about Easter time last year, there was a huge rally held in Dublin city centre, and there were conservative estimates between 50 and 100,000 people took to the streets at that stage. It was a sea of tricolours, and the Irish tricolour was then demonised by the mainstream media as a flag of hatred and a flag of division. It wasn't, I've done video footage of that. I was at that protest. It was all women, children, old men, people carrying their children in their arms. There was no violence at it whatsoever. There was no arrests at it whatsoever. Just a massive kickback against what the government are doing. And they were ignored by the government, demonised by the mainstream media, downplayed, which makes it worse. Because if you've got a legitimate concern and you're doing what's right, Darren, and you're not breaking the law, you're not vandalising, you're not burning people out, you're not wrecking the place, and you're dismissed, you're overlooked, and then you're scoffed at or demonised, it just makes that pressure build up even more. So there's a massive slew of protests last year. They fizzled out because there was no real direction, and there was a great hope that there would be a political uprising behind this, and there was the potential there for that to happen. That didn't materialise for several reasons. That left people being despondent and pissed off and angry, and maybe people don't want to take up arms, or they don't want to go on a spree that'll end them up in prison. Most people are just normal law-abiding people that are frustrated. But what do? You get frustrated and you get despondent. But in Northern Ireland, there was in Ballymena last year, for example, there was several attacks that were carried out by members of a foreign community on some local girls, allegedly.
Yeah.
There's a whole rigmarole behind that case as well, but it triggered off rioting in Ballymena. That then spread very quickly last July, August time, and Deportation and the parts of Belfast, and there was a genuine concern that this whole thing could go up in smoke, or the whole country could go up in smoke, which it was actually, parts of it were. So there's that underlying tension, anger, frustration, then some people will carry it to that level. Not something that I want to see, not something that I condone or advocate.
Northern Ireland is known for it.
Well, we're experts at it.
You're experts.
I grew up. My first 25 years of my life were spent with daily bombing, shootings, and terrorist attacks, and murder, and maimings, and just the worst violence imaginable. And that's not a long way away. That only stopped in the mid-90s. Pretty much stopped in the mid-90s, but
just yesterday,
it's there. And again, this perception, hang on, are we being, for a long time in Northern Ireland, it was Brits out, get the Brits out, get the Brits out. And that's still the mantra for many people in Sinn Féin, for example. However, they're happy then to say, well, but bring the Somalians, the Eritreans, the Ukrainians, the Algerians, the Afghans in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a mad mentality. Everyone's confused. People are hacked off and pissed off. And like I said, it's only a matter of time. They keep squeezing. You keep squeezing, or you keep tightening a screw. It's only a matter of time before the wood splits, and the screw's still being tightened at the minute. But I hope and believe, that something gets done before it reaches that point. But, it's not.
Here's the $1 million question then, Rick, and it's the one that, I ask everybody, it's the same. I ask the same question for COVID. I'll ask the same question for digital ID in a minute. Why? Why is Ireland and the UK and Europe being flooded with low-skilled people who are not, I'm not going to say they're uncivilized, but they're not the same culture. They don't share the same myths and storylines as we do in Europe. Why are we being flooded with these people who are increasing crime? They're dominating the streets. Why?
Well, if you take it all back to something we discussed a lot whenever we were, broadcasting together, or, even before that, stuff that we've covered on social media platforms, if this concept of a great reset is to be believed, okay, that everything must be torn down and built back better, it's not going to be for your benefit or my benefit. This was pushed for a long time by, the so-called World Economic Forum and during during the COVID years. We saw the big pharma coming in. We saw people being locked down, being controlled, being demonized, psychologically manipulated on a scale like we've never seen in history before. This was a real, genuine global event. The same thing was happening in Africa. It was happening in South America. It was happening in China. It was happening in America. It was happening in the UK, Ireland, everywhere. Everywhere was under the same cosh, okay? And you've got to ask yourself a question, well, why was that? Was it a test run for something? And when you look at the way things are going at the minute with the push for digital identity being, incrementally introduced, and it's not too far away now. That stuff we talked about 5 years ago was something on the horizon. Is it really going to materialize? It's very much on the cusp.
It's round the corner. It's here. Yeah.
Surveillance is not getting less. Crackdowns on what you can say is not lessening any. There's an assault on freedom of speech. There's an assault on movements. There's an assault on cultures. There's an assault on people's identities. There's an assault on people's ways of life. And I believe that what we're seeing here is part of, when you can get someone really wound up and frustrated, it drains them and it depletes them and it makes them susceptible to say, look, I just want some form of normality again. I just want some of my old life back again. You might be given that, but it'll be at a price. Well, it means that you can't say anything negative about your government. You can't travel too far. You can't have this type of vehicle. You can only have limited internet access. And you have to be a good citizen. Just work, keep your head down, pay your taxes, and everything will be all right for you. But if you don't do that, dissenters, it's off to the gulag per se. So why is this all happening? Well, I know it's not for the benefit of the British people or the Irish people or the French people or the German people. This has not enriched us in any way, shape or form. So the question is, well, what's it all going to bring about? If it keeps going the way it is, and you mentioned Northern Ireland there, it could be a reversal or a reversion back to, horrific, constant, daily mass murder, bloodshed and death and destruction. And to control that, some type of martial law could be brought in. There could be a real authoritarian crackdown, like we can't even begin to imagine, like the stuff of your worst nightmares. I can see it all heading towards that point because no one I know is getting happier. No one I know is more energetic now than they were 5 years ago. No one I know is more positive than they were. People are like, oh no, they're still at it. They're still in power. They're still screwing us over. We're still struggling. We still can't make ends meet. We're tired. We're worn down. They're still at it. Starmer's still in power. Mayhol Martin's still in power. Ursula von der Leyen's still there. Macron is still there. And even if you remove someone like Justin Trudeau or you remove someone like Jacinda Ardern, it's like cutting the head off a hydra. Some other venomous creature with two heads pops up. So I just think it's a grinding down, Darren. It's a grinding down to leave us susceptible to accept whatever is set before us. Exactly what that'll be, remains to be seen. And
all the while, the Irish culture's getting wiped out, the UK, British culture's being wiped out, European culture's disappearing, and they keep flooding us with these new people. You mentioned digital ID. I mentioned digital ID. I saw recently that the Irish government has said they're going to follow in the footsteps of the Australian government and bring in this age verification for social media, for YouTube, TikTok, all these other different platforms. How is that progressing? What is the propaganda like pushing for it? And are they using illegal immigration as, this is going to, as they do in the UK, digital ID will solve our illegal immigration problem? Are they using those types of tactics to convince the public?
No, they're not using that yet. They're using children, to weaponize this. It's for the benefit of the kids. It's to protect children. It's to protect their formative minds from being exposed to filth and degeneracy. The way I see it is, okay, you take a platform like Twitter or X, who claim to be wanting to keep the fact that you could view porn on there or you could view explicit content on there. Why was it ever made available on the platform to begin with? Okay, if you want to go and watch that sort of stuff, people will go and search in the dark web or they'll go on the pornographic sites. But during the summertime, there was a ban I think it's a ban on porn in the UK. So if you wanted to watch that, you had to get a sign on, sign up to the website,
and prove your age.
Take a selfie of yourself. Take yourself. Hey, this is me.
I like porn.
Hey, how do I look? Keep this one on your database for future reference, or upload your bank details or whatever it was that you did. So I can understand why they did that, because children could access it by just simply saying they were 18 years of age. That should never have been the case. The kids have been exposed to stuff like that. But it's now got to the point whereby, okay, I can live with that to the extent that, okay, if you want to access it as an adult, prove you're an adult. They claim it's secure, your information's secure, but it means children won't get at it. Fair enough. But that's only a foot in the door, Darren. That's just a foot in the door. They'll start off with something like to protect children. Then it'll be to protect your money, or to protect your privacy, or to protect whatever. You need to use digital ID or a sign up for this,
access
or provide your biometrics for healthcare or whatever it happens to be. So the Australians did the same thing, but they've extended it past pornographic websites now. It's social media, period. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever those things are. I think if you're under 16 now in Australia, you can't get access to that. You just can't get access to that.
And everyone has to prove, though. Everyone has to prove their age in order to access it, just to prevent the under 16s from accessing it.
Yeah. Correct. So that's another thing to be aware of. It started off with, access to explicit material. Now it's access to the internet, period, certain websites. But that could then be extended out to other types of websites. They can add to that freely, or they can drop the age down even more, increase it, do whatever they want with it. But either way, it's like, this is not mandatory. You don't have to give us your identity. But if you don't, then you don't access it. It's a little bit like you roll your sleeve up and get the needle in there. You don't have to do that. But if you don't do it, you mightn't have a job. You mightn't be able to travel. You mightn't be able to socialize. You mightn't be able to do this, this, and this. It's coercion, and it's sinister. So there's that element there too. And Ireland are very much following in, or they're aiming to follow in Australia's footsteps. They want to bring in a social media ban for children. They say, it's wrecking our children's minds, it's harming their development, but at the same time they're happy to expose them to filth and perversion in their curriculums in school, and they're happy for men masquerading, LARPing as women, as drag queens, reading them filth in public libraries. That's fine. But don't let them on the YouTube just in case they see something. And
forever that the internet has been here, the number one search term has always been sex. It's always been the number one search term, followed by UFOs, funnily enough. And now all of a sudden it's a problem. And we've got this narrative going on. It's been for the last week. Keir Starmer has been saying, because Grok you can put a picture into Grok, give it a picture, and it'll undress it and put it in a bikini. Yeah. And so all of a sudden Keir Starmer's floating around on X in a bikini. He's been saying, this is obscene. These pictures are obscene. And now they're pushing for a ban on X, for a ban on Grok, and you just know they're going to go, but if you can prove yourself to be over 16, we'll allow you to have access to this particular site. Are they going to succeed with the digital ID agenda? Has the decision already been made? And if they make our lives so uncomfortable, if they insist newborn children, which is another story going around, are automatically given a digital ID, how can we prevent this horrific dystopian future where we're all connected to the system? How can we prevent it from happening? Well,
you would like to think that there'd be such a kickback against this that it couldn't possibly go through. And you hear this term bandied about by people who are trying to be melodramatic, saying, this is the hill. This is the hill that we die on. This is the hill that we die on. Now, let's rewind time back 6 years now, frighteningly enough, 6 years back to March of 2020. If I had said to you in March 2019, Darren, in a year from now, every church, every mosque, every synagogue will be shut. Children will not be in school. You will not be able to visit your parents or your relatives at Christmas. You will have to wear a mask to stand up in a cafe to go and take a pee, and when you come back, you can take it off again. You will have to have mandatory injections, experimental chemicals put in your body simply to enter the pub. Okay? If your parents are dying or your wife or your children are dying in hospital, you won't be allowed to see them. I'll give you an iPad and you can say goodbye. And if you're lowering them into the ground, there's only going to be half a dozen people at the funeral. If I'd have said that to you in March 19, you'd have said, Rick, that's complete bunkum.
I would smile like I'm smiling now,
right?
Even though when I think back, it wasn't funny.
No, and believe me, I'm not laughing because we all went through this and it harmed us all negatively psychologically. But what I'm trying to say is, when you think what was put upon the public right across the world and accepted by the masses, unquestioningly in many, many cases, or people knew it was bunkum but still went along with it anyway because they were browbeaten and psychologically broken, if they can do that and did do that over a period of years, it's not unreasonable to assume that, oh yeah, I'll never accept this. I'll never go there. There'll be too many people protesting against this. The public will never accept this. If they can accept not seeing their family die or mourning them or going to their own funeral, right? You think there'll be such a massive kickback if they try and bring in identity verification to protect children? I would love to say, yeah, that'll never get over the line. It's never going to happen. And maybe it won't, right? But I put no faith at all in the masses when it comes to massive revolt, uprising, because people are afraid. They're afraid to lose their job. They're afraid of getting a knock on the door by the police. They're afraid of getting a letter from HR. They're afraid of losing their source of income, which I understand. Yeah. Because it means then, what am I going to do? This is going to wreck my family's life if I don't roll over and play ball. I just feel that we learned a lot in the last 6 years, what the government is capable of and what people are incapable of. And so when it comes to the digital ID, you asked me the question, will it happen? Maybe, maybe not. Do I believe that there'll be enough people there to vehemently resist it? No.
I mean, they did fail on the vaccine passports.
Yeah, but, how hard did they actually push that? They brought something in that people could see holes in. People were looking around going, well, I don't know anyone that's died that's under 85 off COVID, not with COVID, using the fraudulent PCR test. And social media had its part to play for sure, because you really started off on that. So did I on Twitter. That sparked me into speaking out against authoritarianism. Before that, I never had any presence on anything, and it's ultimately led us to the point that we're at now. Now it's extended out past that to mass immigration and social destruction and digital IDs and everything else, right? So it did wake a lot of people up, and the people that did wake up got very militant about it and have continued along that path. But a lot of people just, shrugged their shoulders and, dismissed you as being a lunatic. So it's hard to know. And still do. When I walk down the street, I'd never eavesdrop and hear people whispering in the corners, they're bringing in digital ID. I'm going to resist this. A lot of people don't even realize what's coming. And when they do come, like, for example, if your doctor writes to you and say, listen, Darren, from now on, unless you sign up to our digital portal or whatever, or verify your identity digitally or biometrically scan us into the practice, you can't see a GP anymore. And you're like, well, you can't force me to do that. Just say, I'm not forcing you to do it. I'm just telling you, if you don't do it, you can't see a doctor, right? There's no gun being put to your head. There is. Coercion's a very, very powerful thing. So, in my opinion, what we saw over the last 6 years, if they can get away with that and force the population to that, will it be that difficult to get digital ID in on the guise of protecting children?
Or they could bring in a savage war, or another illness, and actually we start seeing people dropping dead everywhere. It's a real dangerous illness out that they might have a cure for, whatever. That could do it. They could bring some other type, I could be extreme and go, oh, blue beam and the fake UFO. So they could bring something in that really genuinely terrifies people and therefore coerce them that way. And very quickly, people don't talk about digital ID, but if I get on a bus, everyone's talking about immigration. They are here. Correct. They are talking about that. My final question for you, and this is just a news story from yesterday, and we did have a lot of political conversations in the past when we worked on TNT together. Is there a political solution in Ireland? Because yesterday, Reform, they decided they had a new defector. It's been the big story. Vaccine Minister Zahawi, one of the most evil men ever to grace our parliament, a man who should be in prison or worse. He's just joined Reform. Everyone looked here to Reform. Not me, but other people look to Reform as potentially being a saviour for our political woes in this country. It's quite clear now that they are controlled opposition. Do you have any comment on Reform and Farage and Zahawi and Tice in general? And is there any potential opposition to the current government in Ireland that could reverse all of this?
In terms of Nadeem Zahawi, that brought back flashback PTSD with me yesterday when I saw that bald head of his with those little round glasses and his leering mug. All I could think of was, is this Nadeem Zahawi? Is this not the vaccine pusher? Is this somebody seen retweeted one of his posts earlier on where from 2021 where he was congratulating Sadiq Khan on calling those who refused to take the jab as irresponsible, wicked, evil people with lots of little syringes in his post. This is also, I believe from memory, and this is just off the top of my head, was he not the man that famously founded the YouGov webs or political polling system, sold it out for a fortune, claimed he started it up in his garden shed, then moved into politics.
That would be the man.
That was the same guy. Made so many promises that he backpedaled on and broke on. You've got to ask yourself a question: how big was the envelope that was slipped across Zahawi's wicked paws to enable him to jump in behind Nigel Farage? I don't follow.
He called Farage a Nazi in the past,
Well, and then you've got the like of Tice, and again, I don't follow any English politics at all at the minute, but Tice, he is him and his squeeze. If he's still with Oakenshaw,
she's been out in force.
He co-authored Matt Hancock's book about
he'll be next.
COVID diaries. You know what I mean? So this is all just flashbacks that
I was the same.
And Tice was very pro Ukraine and all this business, but set that shore aside. You asked about the Irish political solution. Yeah. Well, at the minute, no. If the Irish coalition government was to be replaced at the next election, the chances are they'll be replaced by another left-wing, lunatic, Marxist coalition, Sinn Féin, People Before Profit, the Green Party, the Social Democrats, and they're currently headed up the President of Ireland, Catherine the Red Connolly, which is unreal. She won the Irish presidency with less than a quarter of the Irish people actually voting for her. There was 350,000 people spoiled their votes in that, saying, not my president, none of the above. It was a shambles, complete shambles, but she's in there anyway. She's the president of the first citizen of Ireland. The current government, if they were to be replaced tomorrow at a snap election, would likely be replaced by a worse left-leaning
because they always get worse.
Commie government headed up by Sinn Féin. In terms of an actual alternative to that, there are some small Irish nationalist parties out there. Some of them have been working away, doing a great job behind the scenes, but getting nowhere over the last, 5 years. And ultimately, the real wake-up call should have came in November 2024 when the elections happened and this current coalition government was re-elected again. There should have been an almighty push to unify the nationalist movement and to put together some kind of a viable threat to the coalition that in another 4 years from now, when the next election comes, because you can't just form a party and all of a sudden it becomes viable. It takes 5, 10, 15 years for that to be able to happen. At the minute, there's nothing. There's talk. Steve Bannon is talking about installing a new Irish Donald Trump and making Ireland great again, and a new Irish. He's working behind the scenes. Maybe he is. I don't know. I'm not in contact with the guy, but who he's talking to, I don't know. And where he's going to pluck this political savior from, I don't know. Will it happen? Maybe. Is it all puff and blow? Possibly. But in terms of an actual viable alternative that could actually get people out to vote for them, install them into Leinster House, into Dáil Éireann, and make a difference in Irish politics, no. There's nothing close to anything like that happening anytime soon.
And I think it's exactly the same here in the UK, as we saw with Sir Howie's defection. And you mentioned Matt Hancock. He'll probably be on his way. There'll probably be a few others. And still, people will vote for them. The answer has to be, Rick, it has to lie with the public being out on the streets, an uprising. And I'm not suggesting violence. And that voting is not going to be the solution to our problems.
Let me jump in here, right?
Sure.
And I don't want to be too pessimistic here. But I was talking with a chap not so long ago, John Waters, great Irish thinker.
Yeah.
And he talked about the 3 V's. The 3 V's. If there is to be the change that you and I want to see, and probably anyone listening to this wants to see, it will come by one of the 3 V's. The first V is violence, which nobody wants to see. The second V is voting. And because of what you've said, reference reform and, real genuine political opposition in the UK, and what I've just said about Ireland, is the change going to be coming through the ballot box in the next 5 years? Highly unlikely, which leaves the last V being velvet revolution. Velvet revolution, a massive, non-violent uprising, but it has to be numbers. The numbers have to be very, very significant of people getting out and taking a stand and saying, thus far and no further, we're not taking this anymore. So you need to go. Something needs to happen. And then that brings about a velvet revolution. It's not violence and it's not voting. It sort of sits somewhere in between the two of those. I think as people, the middle England or the middle Ireland begins to wake up, the middle classes are impacted. If there's a massive financial downturn, the businesses begin to feel the Celtic tiger is crushed again. It doesn't matter who you vote for, Darren. It doesn't matter where you live. Everyone's going to be devastatingly affected by that, especially if they're losing homes, their children are leaving the countries, their savings disappear, their pension pots disappear, the violence gets so bad that they're literally living behind bars like they do in South Africa.
Yeah.
That will bring about a change, but unfortunately it has to get to that catastrophic level before usually these velvet revolutions happen. So I would say if there is going to be a change in Ireland or in the UK or Europe, it's going to have to be through that third V, I would think, because the other two are not something you would want and not something that realistically is going to happen.
And we want to hope that we get to that point before the digital tyranny is in place and our free speech has been restricted and there's censorship and we're unable to organise and communicate with each other, which is why they want these things in place in the first place. That's
probably why they're pushing so hard for this right now. They know there's no viable political alternative, legitimate one with integrity. They know the people probably will not rise up in enough numbers in terms of a civil war. That's a fact. People could talk about it. Talk is cheap. Takes a lot to take up arms, to go into the street, to be prepared to be shot or imprisoned for the rest of your life because of what you type on social media. It takes a lot for people to do that, but there are people out there that are willing to do it. I think what the government's fear at the minute is that everywhere is reaching this tipping point and it's permeating to every aspect of society, and people are talking about it on the buses now. Even the government are talking about it themselves, saying, well, actually, this is having an impact on our society. They fear the velvet revolution, and if social media can do one thing, it can push out information quickly to millions of people. You could walk down your street, you could sit on the bog having a crap and do a video about, the government, and millions of people could see it and share it, and that is something to be feared. So maybe that's why the big push for this crackdown's coming. That third V's close.
That's what I think we're seeing here in the UK in particular with the X story because, you know, the British government are getting absolutely hammered every single day. The news is getting out. People are gradually becoming aware of an agenda outside of their own political realm, particularly with digital ID. And so they're trying to silence us all. Rick, it's been absolutely amazing to talk to you again. Not only did I have memories back to Zahawi and vaccine passports, but also to the conversations that we used to have in the past. And it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Please go and check out his YouTube channel at No Risk, No Reward 1984. There's loads of great commentary on there, mainly focused on Ireland. But if you want to go and see for yourself exactly what is happening in that country, go and check out Rick's channel. Thank you for listening, everybody. And stop complying. Stop complying. A velvet revolution is what was required. And if you can't do that, at least just try and stay awake.